Greetings, ladies and managers, and welcome to this latest edition of Read Tifos, where I take old stories I've narrated and update them to modern audio standards. This particular story is called Dragon of Diplomacy. Part 1. When humans first reached the fabled continent of dragons, it was a rather magnanimous time for them. They had the military arms, the wealth, the technology, and the manpower to do whatever they wished. They tamed continents, beasts of fable and horror, drafted alliances with races that despised one another, and conquered the riches of the world with incredible guile. Except here. The continent of dragons was not remote. No, it was marked obviously in all sea charts with symbols of dragons, wyverns, and worms all across it. Sailors told stories about getting near the coast, of dragons appearing from nowhere and destroying whole fleets down to the keels. No ship would dare get close due to them. Yet they did. They did with a wild imagination and a spirit to expand. Their first settlement, one given the unassuming name of Brackford, was an unassuming bay just north of a large chain of mountains and valleys. They saw the perfect landscape to dig for resources and to raise livestock. We saw it as an invasion of our home. The humans were not scared off by repeated attacks by the dragons, their wyvern underlings, their whelps, and their kobold minions. They fought and fought and fought, for every inch, for every acre, for every river, for every valley. They fought, and ferociously. As they fought, the politics of our home continued still, as was such for thousands of years. I was but a younger dragon, my domain small and no wyverns or whelps under my wing. I only had a squalor warren of kobold, amounting to at least 400. An unimpressive amount, and nowhere close to the armies the humans could field in a single week, or large and more powerful dragons like my rivals could command with a single word. I was weak. This left me at a staggering end when the humans came to my domain. The war for our home finally came to me. I spoiled to watch them trot over the field before my mountain home, a full military bed with arms, cannons, majors, and siege towers of death, in case I used walls or magic to halt their advance. It was both a bold portrait of a strength and an assurance that they were more than ready to fight dragons such as me. As they approached, I refused to put my kobold warren in front of such a mighty army like most of my brethren would do. They would have been slaughtered to one, and then me with nothing to show for it. Instead, I had them with me, guarding them from their sight with my large form. They were scared of what they called the Tall Ones, as word spread from warren to warren across the land. They had marked hatred on them, yes, but fear as well. They knew there was no stopping them, and that even a mighty dragon as I cannot either. As I watched them march, my eyes caught the glance of one human who stood out from the rest. One human who did not fit with the rest. There were soldiers all around him, the strongest of all the ones I've seen marching. Majors flanked these soldiers, giving this one human more protection than any other. Who was this strange human, and why were they protecting him? I'd never received word from other dragons on such strange humans in their armies. Just word of glorious battles I knew I can never be a part of and can never win in. If this were to be my last stand, I'll do so honorably, I thought. I stood in front of my chargers as they crested the last hill. Many other dragons would never do such a thing and let them be slaughtered, but I myself had little. They groaned on me for the companionship they gave me. I did not want the humans to kill them all. I wanted them to have a chance at escaping. At least, that would have been the idea if the humans had charged, like I expected. Instead, they stopped. It seemed as if they were waiting for me to charge, to fall for their trap and attack with force up close. In hindsight, it was the truth. Every dragon before had attacked ruthlessly, but I was the first to watch and wait. To temper the fury, I wished to deliver and let them deal the first blow. How I wanted them to charge so I could fight them up close, where I could deal them the most terrible wrath and take as many of them as I could. No. They waited, as I did, and time passed. Dawn turned to noon, and my patience for their patience grew irritable. How could they be so patient? Were they not dealing devastating battle after battle with us dragons? With the end of my patience, I stood up. I looked down to the older of the kobold warren, Zarazi, and nodded for him to follow me. I had questions for these humans. They piqued my curiosity with the patience, and I must find out why they are waiting for me. I cannot speak their tongue, but the elder could. Having learned when the first armies fought the dragonkin, he would be my voice and a confidant. I hoped as I walked to them they would finally attack, thus giving me a reason to fight. Yet they held back still. As I grew closer, I could hear their whispers, their talk. They were not afraid, of course. I was but a small, weak dragon at the time. It would have taken no less than a short few minutes for them to fatally wound me, I suspect. It is when I came to their front line and infantry that I saw him, the one human that didn't match the rest. It was a marvel to see the other humans move and clear out of his way as his guard came forward. The mages were ready with their magics. The guards were ready with their arms alongside, lightly shielding spells and enchanted swords made to fight dragons, in case I or other dragons decided to play dirty. But I was above such notions. Most dragonkin were. We fought in battle with honor, as battle was a display of our strength and beauty. I hadn't even known that I was the first to try and speak with them. In doing so, I found the single human's purpose, the reason for their patience. We stared. He was dressed in simple garb, as I saw before, but closer than I can see the finer details. His garb was finely trimmed with delicate patterns and exotic materials. This human was no fool either from the way his eyes bore into mine. I had seen the knowledge, the experience in those eyes. I learned of his purpose, of his true patience. I bowed my head calmly and snorted a breath of smoky ash, a sign of peaceful greeting between dragons. I let it clear before I rose my head to make my proclamation. Humans, I am a boozle. You have entered my domain with bravery, strength, and numbers that I cannot match. It. Do not attack. Why is this? I said. Zarazi translated right after, almost shouting to match the volume of the humans. The garbed humans smiled. I sensed no treachery from him as he spoke to me. Hellwolder, I am Rock, Lord of Longsteed. I represent Emperor Arvus II and his imperial authority as we tame these lands. To answer your question, we must ask you one yourself. I nodded. Very well. What is it you ask of me? Not only do you hold from attacking, but you had been protecting a warren of kobolds. Why is this? We have seen all other dragons recklessly let them die as fodder for their battles. He asked me, a tinge of awe in his voice. I looked down to Zarazi. He had a solemn look on his face. It was painful truth for him, but the truth nonetheless. Many dragons saw these kobolds, who worshipped us as gods to be revered, little more as fodder for war. I did not see it the same way, for I had little in the first place. They were all I had. It is simple, Lord of Longsteed. They are all I have in my domain. My hoard is nothing but measly pile of glowing stones. My mountain was a pebble among the titans of the chain. I have no wyvern, worms, or whelps under my command. Fellow dragons rarely visit me, except for official decrees made by the Dragon of Dragons. I only have my kobold, and they are mine to lose. I have more than enough temperance to hold strong for their sake. I explained with honesty and all the dignity I had. It was a lot to admit. I had nothing. I was a young dragon after all. This is all I can protect, for no other dragon would want such a pitiful domain. Rock looked intrigued as Zarazi repeated my words. He stroked what fur he had on his chin, then smiled once more. I see. And with such an honest answer, I shall give you my honest answer. Before you lies a great army of 5,000 men, an expeditionary force to expand our holdings until we have reached a point where we feel safe for both sides. It has staved off dragon attack after dragon attack as we scour the land for one dragon willing to participate in peaceful accords." He sighed. It must have been an exhausting prospect, but it was clear today it had paid off with me. "I'm sure that you've heard of our deeds as we walked the lands the last few months, but there have been one detail that was wrong with each account." He laughed and held his hands up to the army before him. He was not their leader, but a symbol of the reach of a man I had never heard nor seen. Him and all the mages and soldiers, the smile on their face was wicked. "We are the only army on this land as of right now," revealed Rourke. I reeled back slightly. I had heard tale upon tale of armies, many armies of differing sizes defeating dragonkin, of smashing apart thousands of kobolds, teams of worms and whelps, and powerful wyvern guards with no retreat. "The only one? Surely this is a jest," I said, not believing him at first. He chuckled. "Not a jest at all, I assure you. We are just humans. We have learned and adapted to war long ago, and defeating dragonkin is merely an exercise in proper strategy and planning." "I see." I had little to comment about this. It was something I had to give up as a fact of humanity, that they were the best in warfare. Still, one thing was certain to me then. What of me now? "What are you planning to do now?" I asked. "Am I to surrender to you, swear fealty to your emperor?" The man, to my shock, nodded. It felt as if I had come to make more of a joke of a dragon than I already was. "In a way, yes, fealty is what we wish. We have been hoping to find one cooperative dragon, and have been patiently trying to do so this entire time. Growing our empire alongside was a bonus." I was stunned. They were looking for a dragon to cooperate with them. For what reason could they have? "What is your reason?" Rourke, Lord of Longstead, clasped his hands together with a wide smile. Eyes closed, he gave me his answer. "His Imperial Might wishes to obtain the services of dragons." End of Part 1. Part 2. Dragon of Motive. I realize these days how I regarded humanity quite wrong in those years before meeting and working with them, and in that time, knowing them personally, changed my perspective. In my days as a whelp, I learned of all the knowledge I could about them, and long had regarded them as a race completely insane. The fact was that the race I had long considered insane was quite sane in the end. They came all the way to the continent of dragons, of which they had aptly named Drakenlund, not to conquer it as a primary goal, but to acquire the services of a dragon for something rather mundane, something revealed to me long after I agreed to work with the humans instead of fighting them. Infuriating at first, yet not something I would argue against, as it was easily within my capabilities. "His Imperial Might wanted to acquire the service of a dragonkin like me, simply to set something on fire. Is this a jest?" I asked Rourke, bestowed the title of Lord of Longstead, and apparently the title of Prince of the Lizard Folk. The story of that I did not wish to be regaled to me again. My translator refused to be near the man after hearing it. No jest at all. Fire is exactly what his Imperial Might needs, but not exactly any old fire." Rourke responded to me as the ship we travelled on, the Mary's Majesty, lurched to one side, then to the other before righting. It was a ship chartered by the Emperor himself for the purpose of transporting the titled here and there when on official duties. It was also the only ship that was large and strong enough to carry me. I could have flown my way to their lands, but an invitation to ride and relax was not one I could pass up. I also did not pass up the chance to question him. "What is not exactly any old fire in all of this? Why is a simple fire not suitable enough?" I asked when waited for my companion and translated. Along with me on this trip, as translator, however, was not the elder of the kobold warren Zerazi, but his son Zeraxi. The elder stayed behind to lead them while I was away, along with the humans promised to protect my domain, something I was thankful for. Rourke put a hand to his hair-laden chin and thought for a moment, likely to word it well enough for me. "Well, the fire we need must not only be hot, but magical as well, to last a long time. Magical fire lasts for days, if not weeks, without needing to be attended to if given the right housing for it. For the fire that's needed in this case, Dragonkin are the one of the few readily available firecasters that also do so with copious amounts of magic imbued within such fire. No human or elven mage could do so without rendering themselves to a magical backlash and potential explosion from that. If you were in need of such a thing, why not an elemental imp or a chained demon? My question was made in earnest curiosity. While I was not the strongest nor the most practiced dragon, my fire still burned hotter than most human mages could possibly produce. However, Dragonkin were not the only ones that met that level of power. Demons, especially those of the fire oral backgrounds, had strong fires, and of course used magic as if it were limitless. Their connection to the hull, the world underside, was what gave them this ability. The danger of summoning an imp, let alone a demon, was higher than requesting services of a dragon, at least at first, we had thought. The man sighed and shook his head, but as the year had dragged on and the conflict continued, we had begun considering that alternative. Well, thankfully, you were a calmer spirit, Lady Abuzel, explained Rourke. And that is why your emperor was quick to bestow me a title and promised me a sizable amount of land within your empire. I was uncertain of such a deal, being bestowed things merely because the emperor needed some fire for an unnatural cause. Still, there is no turning back on it now. It is a generous thing he has done. Do not get me wrong, Lord of Longstead, but I simply still astounded by the need for a dragon. Was there no other alternatives? In due time, you will learn why he needed a dragon. As for the alternatives, I've personally sent some of the wisest men in my land for it, and have taken view of it myself in person 3 times. He scoffed and he shook his head, the human way to show disbelief. It is an ambitious project, and one that requires finesse and forces immeasurable. Immeasurable in forces physical and not magical, I assume? I asked. Exactly, he replied. It is why the need for magical fire is needed. We have a physical solution, of course, but the quantity needed is hard to transport the long distances from the mountains to the capital, and was simply far too much to carry without causing issue for the project.
So, the great dragon, Abuzel, is not your first solution, but a second solution because the first one was too costly?
My charge Zeraxi asked. It was not the first time he had spoken up on this trip. He was far more willing to question things than his father. Put that way, yes, Rourke chuckled deeply. Some water splayed from the ship and a practically large wave battered it. The Emperor, of course, justified acquiring the duty of a winning dragon for more than just its task. I hummed. I finally got the heart of what else I wanted to know. What is the justification exactly? Rourke then looked rather embarrassed, like that I asked. He put an arm behind his head and scratched himself and awkwardly answered with, bragging rights. I could only groan at such a foolish notion. I could only grasp at such a brilliant sight. This is astounding. My words, translated by my Cabal charge, only made his imperial might, Emperor Arbos II, bellow a hearty laugh. He was a jovial man, with a thirst for discovery and an invention, as I had learned long away. He personally had improved upon a few important machines humanity used day to day. This was his crown jewel of those efforts, something massive and beyond compare, indescribable. By me, O Zerazi. It is my crown jewel, a project that will carry my people and legacy for progress of motion, he exclaimed, workers all around ignoring him while they continued to work. Zerazi could not help but chuckle at the exuberant attitude. During my time in the Empire, in his presence, I had found that despite his nature, Emperor Arbos II was a fiery man as well, a man of passion, and one not to be taken as a fool. His brilliance with devices and tinkering extended to battle and strategy as well. I knew this man was a legacy in the making, even as he stood there with a childish smile on his face. Legacy. His legacy in question was quite large when compared to the humans working on it, around it, or just standing near it. Its size was of a quality in its own entirety. It was longer than me head to tail, impressive for a machine of human design and build. Much of the massive machine laid covered under white sheets, but what can be seen was metal, shaped and painted in beautiful detail. Splashes of red here, green there, a little blue wherever, with the decorative pattern pulling it all together. I didn't tear my eyes away from such an exquisite details when I asked the question, "When did you start building such a machine like this?" 3 years ago we laid the first joining of the metal, with a little over 5 years ago was when we started designing it. The Emperor began. I heard him rummaging through a pocket and turned to see him pull out a faded paper with some sort of drawing on it. It's 5 years ago that I had witnessed firsthand many concepts and prototypes, including this one in my hand, submitted to me by a single man bent by Held itself to give his invention life. He had been seeking backing for his across the Empire, and I was his last choice when all others rejected him. The moment I saw the plans and what his little prototype could do, I knew that it had to come to being. I watched him walk over to a table with a mass of papers strewn about in stacks. He pocketed the faded paper, then pulled one off the pile and held it up to me. I was looking over what seemed to be a much smaller version of this machine as he continued his explanation. Over the years, we gradually built better and better prototypes to test new ideas and changes to old ones, and they have all culminated in this, the crown jewel of them all, to not only promote its adoption, but debut its service to the people of this empire. A lofty goal, I must say. My eyes bounced from plan to plan. One detail I saw that was carried over from each one was that framed my interest the most, in a more literal sense. I can see in all of these that this machine needs a very powerful fire to work. The Emperor nodded with a despondent sigh. It seemed to be a fact that he wished weren't true. Circumstances of the material we chose meant needing a hotter fire. We could have chosen a material that needed less heat to do the job. But meant being more unsafe and needing to carefully be watched over more over the years. You plan to use this machine for years on end? I asked, impressed. He was not just planning to be impressive, but for longevity as well. Indeed, the inventor estimated that with this design and material used, it can easily last as long as 50 years before needing certain components to be replaced. 50 years. An eternity for a kobold like Zerazi, a long time for a human like the one before me, a short time for an elf or a dragon like me. A mere creation of metal could last this long as a feat usually only held by dwarves, and even then, with meticulous planning. A long time. Most kobolds don't get such an age due to the accidents or dealing with the rival warrens, said Zerazi, who was likely even more impressed by the number than I was. Yes, it certainly is, and with enough care, it can last far longer than that. He laughed and walked over to the cupboard portion. He beckoned Zerazi and me over to us as we followed. Thanks to the incredible space needed to house such a machine, I had no trouble getting around the large room. It was elegant seeing it up close like this, though. I wonder what it looks like underneath all that cloth. I thought aloud. After Zerazi translated, the Emperor moved over to the edge of the cloth and grasped it in his hand. Well, let me show you the rest of it, then. She will be the fastest ever to grace the land in this era and usher in a new one. The Emperor pulled off the cloth, revealing the rest of the machine to us. What was once an elegant design and paintwork was something that could not be more than opposite. It was a mass of rods, wheels, gears, and raw metal welded to one another through a series of odd little screw designs or welds. It was not an elegant sight, but it inspired a sense of awe at its sheer complexity. Of its potential strength and years of slow craftsmanship, it took me minutes to find my voice, another few more for Zerazi to find his to translate my question. This is the machine my fire will be used to power. Emperor Arbos II clasped his hands the same way the Lord of Longstead had when he proclaimed what he was there for, and so I braced myself for something equally insane to come out of this man's mouth. Indeed it is, Lady Abuzel. I want to use your fire to power this great machine, to convert water into steam and drive wheels that will carry this machine and its carriages across the Empire. I was not disappointed by the insanity, yet sheer insanity of the idea. In fact, at that moment, I laughed. I let out a soft laugh at his notion, his request for me to aid him in this personal project to bring his people into a new age. Then I shall do so. Your machine and your passion are certainly something I cannot miss in witnessing coming to fruition. I paused. Another question came to mind. What do you plan to call this machine? He let out a laugh, quiet, but still jovial as always. There was no exclamation this time. Just a simple name for an elegant yet inelegant machine all the same. The Locomotive. End of story. I would just like to thank the T5 supporters. Bushmaster 117, Casper Arnholtz, Strankzoon WRE, Elijah Silvercross, Gray, John Carrington, and Severin Cerberus. Thank you very much.